for the Wildlife Conservation Society at the Bronx Zoo, which has worldwide, I think, affiliations to maintain our...
Hi, my name is Stephen, and I'm a fishing addict.
Welcome, Steve.
You're in good company, thank you. It's nice to be with people who understand. So for those who don't know, for 15 years, I was a contributing columnist to the New York Times Outdoors column. Hi, my name. So for 15 years, I was a contributor to the New York Times Outdoors column. I wound up editing a book for the Times called Upriver and Downstream. Then I wrote a book called Fish On, Fish Off. And my latest book is Catskill Mountains. I also contribute stories to Angler's Journal, Fly Fish Journal, The Drake, Fly Fishing International, and other publications. Now, I'm not proud of these things. I just want you to know the kind of guy I am. So my addiction started early in life, fishing for bluegills in a local pond. They're kind of a gateway fish. And from there, I started fishing for bass, smallmouth, largemouth, and pickerel, and then walleye. And then I started running in with the wrong crowd, and I started fishing for catfish, carp.
That's hardcore.
And then I went on to the hard stuff, saltwater, stripers, bluefish, false albacore, big game. I've caught tuna, I've caught sailfish. It's all kind of a mess. And then, one day, my addiction hit a whole nother level. When for the first time, I hooked a wild trout in the Catskills on my fly rod. I remember the day like it was yesterday. I remember standing in that river and the current sort of purling around me. I remember the way the river smelled. It smelled so beautiful. It was springtime. I remember the warblers in the trees, and I remember the mayflies trickling off the river and the trout rising to them. It was the first time I ever saw a mayfly hatch. It was the first time I ever saw wild trout rising. I remember thinking I had been allowed to enter the secret portal into this magical world for the first time. And then there was that trout. It was rising underneath that branch. It kept coming up and taking mayflies. And then I remember making that final cast. I remember the line unfurling, and then the leader, and then the fly touched down ahead of the fish, and it drifted. And I set the hook, and I hooked a wild 16-inch rainbow that went absolutely batshit. It ran and it jumped and it ran and it jumped and it ran, and I was completely out of control. I didn't know what to do, and it ran and then it stopped. It broke off. And I remember standing there in the river going, oh my God, what was that? Whoa. And I said to myself, I know one thing. I will follow that trout to the gates of hell. And that's what I did. For the next decade, I drove back and forth to the Catskills, back and forth and back and forth, 140 miles one way from New Jersey, back and forth. And I'd sleep on the side of the river, or I'd sleep in the back of my car, or I'd spring from some cheap motel. These were bad times. And then one day I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. This isn't healthy, it's not sustainable, I can't do it anymore. And that's when I got the idea. I said to myself, I know what I'm gonna do. I'll buy a cabin, a fish camp, so I can fish more and drive less, so I can fish whenever the hell I felt like it. And so I began to look. Now, I didn't want some second home, some fancy place. I wanted a simple cabin. I wanted a place where you could hang your waders at the end of the day and then kick back with a cocktail and maybe have a campfire. That's all I wanted. And then I found it. I found a rustic hunting camp built in the 1940s on 14 acres in a hemlock forest. Beautiful, mature hemlock forest with these rocky outcroppings. It was like something out of Lord of the Rings. And best of all, through this forest, there was a 1/4 mile of wild trout stream. My wild trout stream. Not a big stream, it's actually a very small stream. It's only 6 feet wide. In fact, I call the stream the 6-foot wide stream. But it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was lined by these big, mature shade trees that had these sculpted pools. It was full of brookies and even wild rainbows that would run up from the East Branch. And I'd even occasionally see a spawner there. And so not only did I have this cabin and these woods and this stream, but I was within striking distance of the main stem of the Delaware, the East Branch, the West Branch, the Neversink, the Beaverkill, the Willow-Emock. And so I decided vodka. I decided, because I'm an addict, that from this perch, from this cabin in these woods, and all these rivers nearby, they would become my crack den to pursue my addiction. If only it was that easy. If only it was that easy to just have a simple cabin in the woods and fish whenever the hell you wanted to. Because it turns out, it's been anything but easy. So first there were the floods. So we had 3 floods in 3 years. Year 1, we had a 100-year flood. Year 2, we had a 500-year flood. Year 3, we had a 700-year flood. That is 1,300 years of floods in 3 years. So the first flood was not really a big deal. Some of the pools rearranged a little bit, but no big deal. Even the 500-year flood was not a big deal. The dirt road below my cabin washed away. There was an old culvert and washed away. The town came by and they fixed it. It was not a big deal. The 700-year flood. That was a big deal. Anyone remember the flood in 2006, June 2006 in the Catskills? That was a bad flood. So, bridges washed away, roads washed away, people washed away. My farmer friend up the road said 15 inches of rain fell in about 36 hours. And so I remember hearing of the flood. I was actually, it started hitting on a Sunday, and I drove home from New Jersey, and I was like, it's raining a little bit. And then got home to New Jersey. It was beautiful. What I didn't know is that this low pressure system, this freakish, horrible low pressure system, just parked itself over the Catskills. It rained and rained and rained. And then I started hearing stories. You hear about the flooding in the Catskills? No. Oh my God. And I saw some pictures online. It's horrible. So I called my neighbor. The phone lines were down. She didn't have a cell phone. And she lived right up the road from my place. And I finally got through a couple of days later. And I said, Marion, is everything okay? What's going on? She's like, oh, yeah, everything's fine. It was a little crazy over here. Everyone's safe? Everyone's safe. Everything's good. Okay, great. Have you seen my cabin? Is my cabin okay? She's like, yeah, I walked down and I looked, and your cabin it's fine. I was like, okay. I said, is the stream okay? In the woods? And there's sort of this long pause, and she goes, Steve, you're not going to like it. And I went, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. And I drove up, and I pulled into the little grass driveway, and there's the cabin, and the cabin looks fine. She's right. I'm like, oh, the cabin's fine. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I dodged a bullet. So to see the stream, you got to kind of walk behind the cabin. So I walk behind the cabin, and I'm staring at the surface of the moon with like a scale model version of the Los Angeles River going through it. Just this completely lifeless drainage ditch. And I'm just like, so I'm looking, and first of all, 500 shade trees are just gone. Like as if beamed up by aliens, gone. Just gone. And the stream, the entire stream moved like 30 feet over this way. So where there was a stream was like a rock quarry, like thousands of cubic yards of rock and sand and stuff. And the stream itself was now like 2 inches deep and milky and lifeless. And I'm standing there, I'm like, well, okay. The trout are gone. The insect life is gone. The trees are gone. All the frogs and salamanders are gone. Everything is gone. It's just gone. And so my first thought was, sell it. Get the hell out. Cut your losses and go. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And so my second thought was, well, maybe I'd do nothing and just kind of see what happens. And I thought if I do that, probably what's going to happen is I'll be an old man and I'll tell my grandkids, I'll go, you see that drainage ditch in front of Gramps' cabin? There used to be brookies in there. And they go, no. And I go, yeah. And in New Jersey, I know streams like this. There's a stream about 5 miles from my house that a guy who I used to fish with told me his grandfather fished it turn of the last century and used to catch brookies in there. And he even had his fly rod up on the wall. It's an old green heart rod, I remember it. And it had painted in cursive on the blank, Lucky Al. And that was Lucky Al's fly rod. And now it's just an artifact. Because now that stream that once apparently had brookies 100 years ago has maybe a couple of green sunfish, which are invasive, and maybe some creek chub. The brookies have been gone for centuries. So I said, I don't want to be Lucky Al. So I said, okay, I'm not going to do that. I guess, so I decided I was going to learn how to restore a trout stream. That's what I decided to do. And so I did homework, read books, was online, I did all this stuff. And now I can report back, and now I know what it takes to restore a trout stream. It takes 3 things. It takes time, it takes sweat, and it takes painkillers. A lot of painkillers. And it takes trees. It takes trees. And I learned about the New York State seedling program, which I'm assuming Trout Unlimited knows about. And which is like the greatest program ever. And you can buy seedlings in bulk for wholesale prices. And so the next January, on January 2nd, at 9:02 in the morning, I think I was the first person on the phone, ready. And I ordered 500 seedlings, which I planted that April. And so, you guys are Trout Unlimited, you might be saying, yeah, 500 seedlings, that's cool. We did that last weekend.
Yeah, with a dozen people.
Yeah. Or you might be saying, oh, damn, 500 seedlings. I will say this. When you're trying to plant 500 seedlings in a rock quarry, where all the topsoil has been blown out into the Atlantic Ocean, getting any seedling in the ground was a big deal. I bought this extreme planting bar, I think it was called. It was this orange steel Viking weapon, it looked like. And I remember I went up and I had all my seedlings in a bucket behind me, and I went up to the stream and I went, all right, here we go. And I went, here we go. Clang, 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 and like I'm hitting the ground like I was on a chain gang, and like sparks are literally flying from the rocks, like literally, and I get like a rock apart, and like, oh God, okay, now we're gonna cut apart, and I got down a little bit deeper, like, oh, there's a little bit of soil there, and I get the soil down, I'm like, oh, okay, I get a little hole in the ground, and I got it, okay, oh, shoot, here's my seedling, I got the seed, oh, I got it in the ground, like, whoo, oh, covered in sweat. I got a cloud of black flies flying around me. And I turn around, I got 499 more seedlings. But I got them in the ground. I got them in the ground. I had a friend of mine, good friend, really good friend, and we got them in the ground. I paid in beer. And it worked. So then I learned the next part about restoring a stream. It's not for the impatient, because once you get those seedlings in the ground, you're basically standing around waiting for trees to grow, and that's that's a slow thing. And so I would drive up, and I'd get out of my car, and I'd walk into the stream, and I'd look around, and I'd go, oh wow, the red osier dogwood are starting to flower, that's cool. Oh, look at the buttonbush, and oh, those willows look good, and oh, the hybrid poplars, and you guys ever planted hybrid poplars in your... They're this amazing tree. The state sells them. It's a lot of people consider it a junk tree because it's a hybrid, but you want quick shade, it's like you dig the hole and you throw it. It's like I swear I have hybrid poplars I planted in 2007 that are 50 feet tall. I'm not kidding, and this big around. So, and people, they don't last long. You go down in an ice storm, and who cares? If you want quick shade and erosion control, this is the tree for you. But anyway, so I learned all about these trees. Now, I hadn't made a cast in my stream now for 2 seasons, you know? Or actually, I should say 1 season at that point. And my fly rod that I used for the stream, I have, by the way, and Orvis didn't pay me for this, but the Orvis Superfine 6.5 foot 2-weight weighs 1 ounce. I don't know if anyone has that rod. That is the perfect 6 foot wide stream rod. It's supple, it's accurate. Oh, what a lovely rod. The whole, it's just cork. There's 2 locking rings. Oh. Anyway, that beautiful Orvis rod was sitting on my porch just gathering dust. Then next season rolls around. So now we're 2 years after the flood. And I began to notice that the stream had started to kind of re-engineer itself. It was like looking a little bit better. And every time it would rain, it would go up and like stuff would get moved around. And like I noticed it was almost like the stream was trying to become a trout stream again. There was sort of a riffle pool thing happening. Wow, this is pretty cool. And the seedlings are coming in, and there's this one pool that I've been eyeballing. Every time I looked at it, I was just like a little more interesting, a little bit craggier, a little deeper. And then one day I was like, all right, it's time. I went on the porch, I got my 2-weight, I strung it up, I put on a stimulator, and I approached that pool. I put the stimulator down, and I twitch it the way I like to twitch fly, and oh wham! Oh my God! And I caught a 7-inch brook trout. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God! Wow, where have you been? Hey, welcome back! I couldn't believe it. And I'm going to tell everyone right now, I almost started crying. I think I actually did cry a little bit. It was very emotional. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, it's a miracle! The trout are back! The trout are back! But, you know, the thing is, the more I read about it, and the more I understood brook trout, it wasn't a miracle the trout came back. The trout have been in the Catskills for 14,000 years, since the Wisconsin Glacier receded. So, it's a safe assumption they've survived 500-year flood, maybe 1,000-year flood. I began to realize every rock and boulder you see in a river around here was moved from some cataclysmic event. So the trout can survive. I mean, I just gave them kind of a head start. But it also made me appreciate how a trout stream works, and how trees are such an essential part, and shrubs are such an essential part of a trout stream. Like up until that point, when I was in like pure fishing addict mode, I never thought much about that stuff. It was like a trout stream is cold water, bugs, and trout, and there's your trout stream. But now I realize it's much more intricate. Like trees are essential to a trout stream. Trees shade the stream, keep the water cool. They stop erosion. They provide cover through, root balls and undercut banks. They drop organic matter in the river and the creek that sinks to the bottom and aquatic insects feed on. bugs hatch, and they use the foliage to mayflies molt in there. You need trees. I mean, trees are just essential. So I was like, all right, cool. I got trees. This is great. So then I started pulling on that string a little bit more. I'm like, well, what do trees need? And I came to the conclusion that trees need birds. And because birds feed on pest insects, and birds disperse seeds and grow more trees. So I'm like, okay, I need trout, a tree, birds. And I got birds. My 14 acres of woods. It's a great migratory swath comes through of warblers and thrushes and tanagers and orioles. So I'm like, I got that. That's cool. All right, what else am I going to need? I need some frogs and salamanders. Okay, got to keep the pest insects in check. All right. And then sometimes those shrubs I planted get browsed by deer and rabbit, which I hate. What keeps those in check? All right, I get black bear, I need black bears, I need coyotes, throw in a bobcat, maybe some fox, and I had all these things. So I'm like, okay, I got it. And I was like, pulled on the string, I was like, wow, this is super complicated. If I want a brook trout, I need like a black bear. That's so weird how that works. And then I started to feel like a steward of my 14 acres. And that was a good feeling. I was like, yeah, I can be a steward. And I'll protect everything here in this 14 acres. That's what I'm going to do. I'll protect the black-throated blue warbler and the black bear and the brook trout and the bobcat. I could do all that stuff. And so the stream's coming back. There's some hatches. There's more trout. I got all the wildlife around. I'm feeling like Mr. Stewart. And right around then is when I learned about fracking coming to the Catskills. And my first reaction was, well, what's fracking? It sounds dirty. And then I learned that a lot of my neighbors had signed these leases to allow gas drilling on their property. And I was like, whoa, what are you talking about? What's going on here? And then I started to get these leases in the mail. And I remember I got this one lease, and there was like a little bit of a land rush going on at this point. Everyone was trying to outbid everyone. I got this lease, and I read it, and I was like, 14 acres, carry the two. It's gonna like almost pay for the rest of my mortgage. But I said, I can do a little research on this. I don't, this is crazy. I did some research, and then I found out about all the thousands of gallons of fracking fluid that they pump into the ground, and the waste that comes out, and it's like radioactive, and then you're punching in the well pad, and like hundreds of trucks come in, and then they flare the well, and then there's noise pollution and light pollution, and humanity descends, and I was like, no, not gonna happen. I'm not touching this. No way, it's gonna happen on my 14 acres. Forget it. And then I learned that New York State had permitted 3 preliminary wells. And one of those wells was about a quarter mile from the front porch of my cabin. And then I learned that I was going to be included in something they call a spacing unit, which is take a well, ding, they draw 1 square mile around that well, 640 acres. And if enough people have signed a lease within that block, even if you didn't sign a lease, they're going to be drilling under your property. Because fracking is they go down and then they turn horizontal. And so it's something called compulsory integration, which is a word I didn't want to learn, but I had to. And so once I learned they're going to be drilling under my property, I said, man, I'm going to have to fight this. And this was the last thing I wanted to do. All I wanted to do was fish. I just want to go out and catch some wild trout. But I figured if I didn't do it, I might look and there might be no more wild trout to catch. And so I became a reluctant activist, what some would call a fractalist. And what did that involve? That involved going to public hearings, testifying in public hearings, going to another public hearing, testifying at that public hearing, writing a lot of letters, going to Albany for a lobby day, getting all my friends to write letters. And it just kept going and going. It was like trench warfare. It just went on and on and on. And the whole time I was doing it, I was like, this is just a done deal. This is going to happen. I mean, like, oh, okay, I go to the hearing, testify. But it just, you're up against big oil. Like, we're not going to win this. And Pennsylvania is booming now. They're allowing fracking, and everyone, there's so much money to be made. There's also other stories about spills and well blowouts and people lighting their tap water on fire and all that stuff. But it just still seemed inevitable. It was just a matter of time. I was going to turn around, and here come the trucks. Here they come, right past the 6-foot wide stream. There they go. And then, December 2014, sitting in my office, I get a phone call. Check the New York Times. New York State bans fracking. They did. Couldn't believe it. Oh my God, another miracle. Maybe even as good as the brook trout coming back. And they did. They did. They banned fracking. And man, did we celebrate. Whew. That was such a good time. And so, okay. So I wrote about that in Catskill Mountains. But I don't want you to think that Catskill Woods is only about fracking and floods, because there's actually a very beautiful chapter about my outhouse. And in fact, I call it my beautiful outhouse. And so, what the hell does an outhouse have to do with fishing? I'm not really sure, but it does. To me, there's something about a well-appointed cabin in the woods with a really nice outhouse. And my cabin didn't come with an outhouse. And I have a fully functioning bathroom and running water and electricity. My wife comes up there and lights it and all that stuff. But I wanted an outhouse. I've always wanted an outhouse. So I got a bunch of fishing buddies and mine together, and we were like, okay, let's design and build an outhouse. And we did. And my outhouse is not right next to my cabin. It's up in the woods. You gotta walk to get. You gotta want it, and you gotta earn it to get to my outhouse. And I didn't just build any old outhouse with like a smelly pit in the ground. I built a moldering privy. Does anyone know what a moldering privy is? So that's awesome. So a moldering privy is an outhouse that sits on a cribbing, and you actually walk up steps to get to it. And there's a screened-in cribbing, and inside that cribbing is a compost pile. And every year I restock that compost pile with 500 red wiggler composting worms from UncleJim'sWormFarm.com. If you need worms, that you go to Uncle Jim. And the worms live in the compost pile, and they do what I will call God's work. And then when you use the outhouse, and then when you're done, I have a bucket of partially composted leaves called duff. You take a handful of that, and you drop that in, and between the red wigglers in the compost pile underneath and the duff on top, it's amazing. And here's the crazy part, and it's true. No smell. No smell. Now I will say this. When I have 10 of my fishing buddies up, by the end of the third day, okay, you get a bit of smell. But give it a day or two and no smell. It's really amazing how it works. And so, what's better than it's early May and you have your coffee and you go up into the woods and you open the door, and who's gonna do it? You leave the door open, you're in the woods, you're in the middle of the hemlocks, and you sit. And there's always an ovenbird nearby that nests in early May. And anyone know ovenbird? Ovenbird is, everyone here who trout fish around here knows an ovenbird because it's a trout stream bird. It has this very sharp teacher. Like if I had a tape, you go, oh yeah, that bird. Anyway, there's always an ovenbird nearby that nests, and so you listen to the ovenbird, and sometimes you hear a grouse drumming off in the woods, and the rough grouse, boom, 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 boom. And you feel the grouse drumming more than you hear it. It's like this ultrasonic sound. It's weird. I remember the first time sitting in the outhouse and I hear a grouse, and I was like, what did I eat? And I was like, oh, that's a grouse, that's so cool. And so you sit there and your grouse is going, the ovenbird's singing, you got the stream over there, and you're thinking, later I'm gonna get the 2-weight and I saw that brookie, and then I'll go down to the main stem and March browns are hatching, and what's better than that? No, really, I'm asking everyone. No. Nothing's better than that. So, now you're probably saying, when the hell is this weirdo going to start talking about fishing? And so, here's what. So, in the book, between each chapter, there's a fishing journal entry. Between the chapters of fracking and floods and all that. And the reason I did that was not just to break up the chapters. I did it because through this whole ordeal, it was fishing that sort of kept me going. When things got really bad, when I thought like fracking trucks are coming tomorrow, or I looked out over that rock quarry with a couple of sticks I just planted and said like, how the hell are trout ever going? I go to the main stem or the east branch or whatever, and I catch like a big wild trout. And I go, okay, that's why I'm here. Okay, I got your back. We're no fracking, because you gotta, I need you guys here. And I catch a big rainbow, and I got your spawning tributary. I'm gonna fix it for you. And that's what kept me going, and that's why, that's why we fish. We go to like restore ourselves, and or forget about stuff, or whatever. And that's why I fish. And so, I'm gonna end my talk with, I'm gonna read an excerpt from one of my journal entries. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, I'm going to set it up. The only thing I want to set up is, took place on the main stem of the Delaware. I was wade fishing, there's no drift boat involved. And it was a very steep bank, and there was a fish rising below me. And I waded to the fish. When I finally got ready to cast, I actually sat on the bank, and I had my legs hanging over and my feet propped up on a rock. That's the only setup. Okay. The trout comes up again maybe 30 feet away. I look over my shoulder to calculate the physics of how to keep the fly and leader from snagging in the steep brushy bank behind me. I angle my back cast upward, then manage a sort of half roll cast up and out over the river. It's ugly, but it somehow works. The first few casts are off the mark, but the next one is not. It lands 6 feet above the trout and maybe 3 feet beyond its feeding lane, which is my intention. I quickly lift the rod to skip the fly up current and above the fish. Then I drop the tip and pop a few extra feet of slack into the river so the fly can drift without drag. It works, and I tense while my sulfur imitation approaches the trout. It drifts another foot, then pushes up in a bulge of water and vanishes in a slow, confident rise. I lift the rod and feel solid thumping weight. Then the fish, very purposefully, turns and heads into the current and downstream. This is not the high-octane run of a crazed rainbow just before it greyhounds out of the water. It is the measured but unstoppable retreat of a very big brown that has just declared, I don't like this, and I'm going home to my favorite log jam 3 miles downriver. Fly line pours off the reel in one long, sustained run. First, the thicker weight forward section is gone, followed by the thinner running line. Then I feel a little speed bump of my backing knot dancing through the guides, chased by yards of thin white dacron. I try to stay calm, and I do this by remaining seated. The grassy bank has become my fighting chair. My feet are braced on the rock, and the deeply bent 9'5" weight is pointed upward, with the butt resting firmly against my belly, as if in a gimbal on a rod belt. All I can do is wait for the fish to stop running. When it finally does, it immediately changes course and begins swimming toward me. I reel quickly but steadily to keep even pressure on the rod. I don't want any sudden movements to agitate this fish any further. I don't want it to jump, and I don't want it to run again. I want to gently but firmly ease it closer and closer until before it realizes what has happened, this trout of a lifetime is in my hands. Yes, I believed it was that big. Reeling up 50 feet of backing, plus an entire 90 feet of fly line, takes a long time, even without an enormous trout on the other end. Minutes pass, and the fish slowly draws closer. The backing knot comes bumping back up the rod, briefly catching on one of the snake guides and terrifying me, but then pulls free and safely nestles back onto the reel. Then comes the running line and the first half of the weight forward head. I strain to see the fish, which up to this point is just an unseen force. How big is it? I've heard stories of 25 and 26-inch browns sometimes taken. A few years earlier, there were rumors of a 10-pound 30-incher caught in the West Branch, maybe 15 miles from where I sit. Just then, I see it. A yellow flash, 15 feet away and maybe 4 feet deep. But that's all it is, a flash. Too far and too vague for me to even begin to estimate its size. And by now, that's all I want. Just a good look to know if it's 4 pounds or 5 pounds or maybe even larger. I'm sweating now. All it will take is another few turns of line on the reel to get my first solid glimpse, and I will know. And then, you guys want me to keep going? You sure? Want me to keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. All right. And then, without warning, it's gone. The hook is pulled, just like that. The rod hangs limp as I reel up the last few feet of fly line. The sulfur imitation comes to the surface and wakes in the current, looking like a wet piece of fuzz after being submerged for the last 10 minutes. The full gravity of what just happened sinks in, that I will never see this trout, ever, and it will haunt me. I slump in my grassy fighting chair, feeling like Hemingway losing a 1,000-pound marlin off Cuba. The big river flows past, oblivious. Sulfurs continue to hatch. Eventually, it's time to get up and look for more risers, while dodging ticks, poison ivy, and rattlesnakes. Like I said, you don't ever want to go to this wicked place. Okay, I'm going to end here. It has 3 names. I call it 16 Brook Stream, but it's sometimes called Peasetti Brook. But it's not technically Peasetti Brook forks, and the fork that runs in front of my house, even though it's bigger, changes names. And it's either called Lakenbrook or Pierce Pond Brook.
Oh. Well, I was reading your book, I was trying to get an increase where I was going to suggest Trout.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, no one ever fishes the stream. It's like almost all private. There's a lower stretch that's a public fishing stream. It has the signs, but it's you have to really love 5 and 6 inch brook trout, which I do, so I'm very happy there.
What's this do? I do.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Come on up.
Where's your house in New Jersey?
Scotch Plains.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, what river was that down that you were fishing?
The Broadhead.
The what?
The Broadhead? The one that I was showing off the picture?
No, the one in New Jersey that you said.
Oh, that, the one that doesn't have fish anymore in it?
Right.
Yeah, where now it's all filled.
I don't even know the name of it. I gotta be honest. I don't know. It's just like.
Was it close to Scotch Plains down through there?
Yeah, well, it's 5 miles.
Because it was like you were all the way to a couple other rivers there. Ed stopped you at one of your companies. He has your book. He from Union County.
Okay.
That's where he started learning to fish.
It's a tributary of a stream called the Green Brook, which is, a stock stream.
Right.
The stream isn't stocked. It looks, you look at it, you're like, oh, it actually looks nice, but it's bathtub warm. It comes out of a lake now.
Right.
It's just, the trout are gone. They're gone. They're really gone. But.
Did you do all the work on the weekends, or?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I take a couple of days off, and it was a lot of work. And I'm fixing up the cabin. I have a whole chapter about that. It's like home decorating stuff, though. My wife did that. She has the eye for that kind of stuff. But yeah.
Did the seedlings ever come up?
Yeah, most of them have. I mean, I planted a lot of stuff that just I never see them again. The deer come and browse them. And the problem is, the soil is so crappy, and it's getting shady now. I mean, if you could see before and after, and I kind of was like, oh, I'll do a PowerPoint, but I'd rather just stand up here. But before and after would be pretty impressive. After the flood, you'd be like, oh God. And now you look at it, you're like, oh, it looks fine. And the funny part is, I planted so much stuff, yet most of the stuff that's come up and is now, 15 feet tall are birch trees that I had nothing to do with. They just came up on their own. And now there's this thicket of, it's either yellow birch or river birch, I'm not even sure which one. It's just all up and down. But there are, you know, I know the trees I planted, they're like my children. And I'm like, oh, hey! And then when one of them gets browsed, I'm like, oh! Or sometimes a tree just dies for whatever reason. But it's come a long way. You could have seen it in 06 and seen it now, you wouldn't recognize it. I'm pretty proud of that.
So with the quarter-mile of stream, we were quite a bit, that's a nice, nice patch.
Yes. I did most of the work on the last 200 yards past the cabin, that go past the cabin. I did sort of interspersed work, the full length of it, but most of the real heavy planting, because that was the part that because what happened was we had the flood. All those trees hit the culvert, and apparently it grew and just blew out. And there was some cataclysmic thing that happened. Some sort of amazing flash flood. And you go up above to a certain area, and it's not, you know, there's some erosion spots and still banks that are slumping, but not nearly what I got. And below me was just destroyed. And you can see where I didn't restore, and there's this, you know, still over all these years, there's not much growing. But where I planted, it's doing great. And every now and then when I still plant seedlings sometimes, I'll go downriver and I'll sneak some onto someone's property. Hopefully it'll grow.
But that whole quarter-mile has fish in it now?
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Oh yeah.
Well, just brook trout rainbows?
Rookies and rainbows. And I've caught one brown. In the 20 years I've owned the place, I've caught one brown. And which the more I read, the more I think might be a good, I mean, there was a fly fisherman story about brook trout and being crowded out by wild fish. I don't know if you guys saw the latest fly fisherman. It was really an interesting story about, you know, over time, brook trout are just going to get pushed out of a lot of streams from wild fish. And anyway, I'm glad the browns don't make it up. And the reason they don't is because there's a culvert the culvert right in front of my place is fine. The one below that is really high off the river, up the stream bed, and I don't think the browns will make the jump. The rainbows do, and if you can see the culvert, you'd be like, oh my, how do they do it? But they do it every year, because every year there's fingerling rainbows in my stream. Somehow they make this jump that's like this. And not only do they make the jump, but they jump into like a jet, like a fire hose of water for 25 feet. So they jump, they hit that, and they must just go. They're just amazingly powerful fish to do that.
You know, I don't know if you're aware, but, you know, we've recently been part of this, changing of the fishing regulations and the stocking regulations and everything. And it's a big issue for us with the Ashokas to get it designated as a wild rainbow hatchery, so that there would not be stocking, so that the idea is that the rainbows hopefully will begin to grow larger.
Yeah. I had mixed feelings.
It's that whole idea, but nobody really understands the competitive nature between the browns and the rainbow.
Yeah, and the brook trout.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no brook trout in the East
Well,
Branch.
brook trout are screwed in the Ashokas, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, you never find brook trout in the East Branch of the Delaware. They never go down there, and they probably, well, for a number of reasons, it gets too warm, and they probably get crowded out or chased out by brown, or they get eaten by brown. That's probably what really happens.
Well, you're right that the idea of the big rainbows and the big browns, but you catch a little brookie like that, and it's awesome.
Yeah,
You know.
it is.
When we did the brook trout study on the stream we picked, there was a dam that got breached. And we were pretty confident above that we were going to find brook trout, which we did. But we were also very surprised that we found browns and rainbows right up there.
Yeah. That one really big.
And that dam
Oh, yeah.
that was a pretty good sized breach, right, Russell?
That wasn't a big stream either. It wasn't a big stream. It was probably 6 feet. Yeah.
I mean, they can do it. Each fish can jump.
Yeah, the rainbows can definitely jump. I had mixed feelings when I catch rainbow. I mean, some years I'm like, oh, where are all the brook trout? It's all rainbows. And then I catch a brook trout. I'm like, oh, that's fine. And then, you know, it seems to be 50-50 rainbows and brookies right now. The biggest fish in the stream, except, you know, the very rare spawner. I'm usually, you know, I close my place in the winter, and I usually open it after spawning season is done. But I have seen spawners in there, but very few. I had this one time. Ooh. That pool where I caught that first brook trout, a couple years later, I was fishing in that pool with a little caddis or something, and it was in early May, and the stream had been high, the water was high, there was actually a Hendrickson hatch coming off, and just sort of, it's not real dense hatches, it was trickling off, and I knew I could use a dry, and I make the cast, and the fly's floating, and I was like, wow, what's that big rock doing, following, that it was a rainbow, like this big, in my stream, which was this big. I couldn't believe it. And he went, and then he went underneath this undercut bank. I was like, oh my God. And I went back, and I made a cast, and he took it, I got him for a second, and he just went right back. Never to be seen again. The next week I went out, and the stream had dropped 3 inches, and he had dropped back down the East Branch by then. But, well, my point was that the largest fish in the stream are brook trout. Every year, I'll catch a 9-incher, which is like, wow, and there's one pool where I see fish that are bigger. There's a culvert, you look and you spook fish that are, 10-ish, which is a really nice brook trout on any stream as far as I'm concerned, but anyway.
Are the hunters still up there?
You
You bought a house in the hunters camp?
No, it was owned by hunters.
Oh,
The
okay.
previous owners were deer hunters. But yeah, there's still, there's big, several hundred acres right near my place was owned by a hunting club, actually out of Brooklyn, called Metropolitan. So there's a lot of hunting still goes on. I wish more of it, because I really don't like deer.
Now you don't have to close up your house and worry about the season, though, because you can fish all year long.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. And now I can.
Although I don't know if I want to be fishing out in the middle of January.
Yeah.
I know it's hell and we're addicts, but.
Yeah, I gotta run the line. Yeah.
First of all, I guarantee you that everybody in this room has experienced at least some of what you were talking about. We lived there in for example, me and my wife have been planting some nursery stock, and I'm amazed at how the rocks you take out of the hole where you plant the tree and have a larger volume than the actual hole and anything like that. I understand how that works.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Yeah.
But the question I wanted to ask was, what exactly the hatches in your stream? Are you noticing the diminishment of the mayfly population?
Okay, I could definitely speak to that. The lower East Branch, where my PZE brook comes in, absolutely, way off. So I've been fishing there 20 years, right? Same stretch, so I have access, private, I have access to this one stretch. That's my spot. I sit on the same rock, waiting for stuff to happen in the evening. And the past couple of years, it's like June 7th, perfect everything. And I'm like, where's everyone? And they're just not, there's a couple, but it used to be like, you'd see the glint as the sun would go behind the mountain, you'd see the last shafts hitting the spinners, and like it was snow, and so every now and then you couldn't hit a hatch, oh, everything's okay, but for the most part, way down. The stream, oddly enough, has a really good sulfur hatch.
We've heard about that.
Yeah, which, and it's strange because like I don't really see it when it's happening during the day. I don't really notice sulfur's trickling off, but what happens is like during like peak season, I'll drive down PZE Road and I'll fish in the East Branch in my spot till dark, late. And then I'll drive back up the road, and as I drive up the road in my headlights, there's like thousands of sulfur spinners going through my headlights. Wow, and they're everywhere. So maybe like a week or two, there's Hendricksons, there's Isonychias, there's a lot of caddis, there's big sedge caddis, there's big stoneflies, there's yellow sallies, that kind of thing. There's some, I think.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, considering
That's a
what it
nice
was.
list.
Yeah, there's no drakes. It's too small for drakes. Plenty of drakes in the branch.
Somebody like Diane College said that this was the most awesome sulfur hatch they've ever experienced.
Yeah.
This branch, when they were fishing. So
It's weird because like, on the lower east, on the East Branch itself, the sulfurs are off. But on my little stream, they seem fine. Who knows? But I think the general trend is.
no, it's definitely big. Recent study in Ohio, they estimated that the mayfly population is going to be reduced by 60%. 60%.
Wow.
Well, reduced by 47, 60% remaining.
Yeah.
It's happening all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, there's a general bug decline around the world. Everywhere.
That's
Insects
really
declining, no matter what.
The mayflies are one of the most ancient order of life form on the planet.
Yeah.
You know, and they're very retreat.
So the other metric that we use for this, the general bug decline, is my porch light in my cabin. When I first got the place, a humid summer evening, you go in that, and the porch light right by the screen door, you'd be like, oh god, and you'd run in and like 50 moths would follow you.
Yeah.
We had Luna moths and all sorts of stuff. And now it's like buggy, humid, July, and you're like, oh, okay, there's some, but like it used to be incredible. But just recently, it's something anecdotally, not scientifically, my own observation, something's going on with bugs up there at least, around my porch lights.
No, it's worldwide.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the scientific studies say, but my own personal example, I definitely say, yeah, something probably.
Well, it's definitely all for yourself. Do you fish yourself as much, or are there any?
I gotta confess, I think I fish myself.
Well, come
On
on
that
down.
side of the Catskills, I know. This year.
You gotta fish our side of the mountain.
Okay, deal, let's do it.
And there's a couple of books about fishing our side of the mountain.
I know. I had friends who were like, why? I'm like, I don't know, because I could drive 2 minutes and be an East right, but that's no excuse. This is the
True. That's true.
Well, you have to.
But I use the same excuse for not moving away from the focus that much.
There you go. We all have our home water,
Yeah.
soil.
It's like it's 2 minutes away. So
Yeah.
Driving the Hancock was what, an hour and a half?
Yeah.
2 hours? By the way, how long does it take you to get from Scotch Plains to Hancock?
Anywhere from 2.5 to 8 hours.
Well, I know, but on a good run,
If I leave on a Saturday morning and I'm determined, I can get up there in about 2 hours and 40 minutes.
it's almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right, about right.
Do you want to talk about your work with Bronx Zoo at all? Also,
I'm in the communications department, so I publicize. We have conservation projects all around the world. We're in 60 countries. Everyone knows the Bronx Zoo, but there's scientists working in like where tigers live and gorillas and humpback whales and jaguars and leopards and all the rest. And they come out with studies at creating protected areas, poaching incident, good and bad. And I'm in the press office, so I publicize that stuff. So that's what I do. I work with really interesting people, really dedicated. The scientific staff is
You need them to find out what happened to the bug.
yeah. They'd say, oh, give me funding, I'll study it.
well, Steve, you can't read without signing a few books.
Oh, yeah, sure, I brought books too, so. Oh, my only commercial plug. I mean, it'd be great if people want to buy books, but. So, Fish On, Fish Off, I don't know if people have it. You may or may not have it. It's my second, upper and downstream, I edited for the New York Times. Fish On and Fish Off is a bunch of like DIY fishing stories and stuff that went wrong. I did an audiobook. I just finished it. The book came out, the print came out in 2016. I always wanted to do an audiobook because I'm a bit of a ham. And I did it. And it just came out and it's on Audible. So
Which one is?
Fish On, Fish Off.
It's on.
It came out March 9th. So I did some.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It took a year. It was